2 days before New Year's Eve, Miriam Grant sat at her dining table while her son Adrian and his wife Liora slid a thick contract toward her. Their smiles were cold, calculated, like predators pretending kindness. "Sign this, Mom," Adrian said, voice stripped of affection, "or you're cut off from everything." Liora leaned back, arms folded, a practiced smirk on her lips. They believed she was a helpless old woman living alone in a large house she couldn't maintain. What they didn't know was that Miriam still owned a vast 740-acre ranch worth millions, and she was far from helpless. They also didn't know she had secured $8 million in an ironclad trust they couldn't touch, not even in their most ambitious dreams. She watched them with quiet disbelief, wondering how the children she raised could one day look at her like prey. But before revealing the storm that was about to fall upon them, her story needed to be understood from the beginning. Miriam Grant, 63 years old, had survived hardships that would have broken younger souls. Her wrinkled hands, resting calmly in her lap, had pulled plows, fixed machinery, and held her dying husband 3 years earlier. After his passing, everyone expected her to sell the land, retire, and disappear into some quiet existence. Instead, Miriam repaired every broken fence, balanced every account, and expanded the ranch's value beyond anything her husband ever imagined. And now, her own son wanted to steal it all with a single signature. The manila envelope Adrian tossed onto the table lay there like a ticking bomb. Its embossed gold logo mocked her, an expensive law firm hired to disguise theft as legal formality. Afternoon sunlight streamed in through the windows she and her husband had installed as teenagers. Every corner of that house echoed with memories. Laughter, arguments, harvest celebrations, holidays with family. Yet Adrian and Liora looked at it as nothing more than a future profit. "Did you read the contract?" Liora asked, tapping her manicured nails against the table. Her emerald dress shimmered under the light, but her voice held no warmth. "You'll move into a luxury assisted living facility. Top-tier nurses, gourmet meals, activities. Everything paid for. In exchange, Adrian becomes the administrator of the ranch. Simple. It's fair." The word fair sounded like poison dripping from her tongue. Miriam stared at the young woman who had asked 3 questions the first time she visited their home 5 years ago. "How many acres? Any other heirs? Will you sell soon?" At the time, Miriam dismissed it as curiosity. Now she saw it clearly. The greed had been there from the start. "And if I don't sign?" she asked, voice steady despite her racing heart. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug for grounding. Adrian exchanged a loaded glance with Liora. It was rehearsed, planned, practiced. Then he leaned forward, and darkness crept into his eyes. "Then we take more drastic measures," Adrian said coldly. "We spoke with Dr. Caldwell. He'll certify that you're no longer mentally fit to handle your affairs." Miriam's breath hitched. "You're 63, alone, forgetful. Remember the day you couldn't find your keys?" he prodded. Liora nodded smugly. "A judge would understand you need supervision," she added. The threat settled like ice in Miriam's veins. They weren't just after her property. They wanted to declare her incompetent, strip away her autonomy, and cage her inside a facility while they lived off her life's work. But they underestimated her memory. "The keys," Miriam repeated softly. "You mean the day I spent the morning supervising barn repairs? The keys I left there." She looked at Liora sharply. "And you? You typed something into your phone while Adrian questioned me. Building evidence, weren't you?" Liora stiffened, then scoffed. "You're paranoid. That's another symptom." She stood, smoothing her dress. "Look at this place. Dust, dying plants, chipped paint. You can't manage this anymore. You're too old." Those words struck like a slap, echoing in the silent room. Yes, the porch needed paint. Yes, the summer heat had killed a few plants. But Miriam was 63, not broken. She managed 740 acres alone. Her cattle thrived. Her crops flourished. Her finances were immaculate. But they didn't care about facts. They cared about ownership. You have until tomorrow at noon, Adrian said, rising. He dropped the contract back onto the table with a thud. Think carefully. This can be easy. Or very difficult. But either way, it will happen. Liora followed him, a shadow cloaked in expensive perfume. At the doorway, Adrian paused. And Mom, he added quietly, almost threateningly. Remember, you're alone. You have no one else. We're your only family. Then the door shut behind them, vibrating through the empty house. Miriam listened to their footsteps fade across the wooden porch, the slam of truck doors, the engine roaring to life. Dust billowed behind their vehicle as they sped away. Only when silence returned, when the final echo of their departure dissolved, did Miriam allow her composure to break. Her hands trembled violently. She collapsed into her chair, staring at the contract. The fine print sprawled across 20 pages, each clause more sinister than the last. Total transfer of land, unrestricted access to bank accounts, revocation of her will, Adrian as the sole beneficiary. And at the end, a chilling line. Any attempt to revoke this agreement triggers automatic evaluation for mental incapacitation. Perfect trap. Sign it and she lost everything. Refuse it, and they'd paint her as unstable. But Miriam had one advantage they knew nothing about. She had been preparing for this for 2 years, ever since Liora's greed first showed its teeth. She had created an irrevocable trust 23 months earlier with Roland Pierce, a discreet lawyer unaffiliated with her family. The trust held $8 million, profits from decades of ranching, investments guided by her late husband's wisdom. Money Adrian and Liora would never touch. No contract could override it. No judge could access it. It was beyond their reach. Miriam stood slowly, knees aching, and walked to the large window. The golden sunset stretched across her land, the wheat fields swaying gently like a promise. In the distance, she spotted Thomas Hale locking the barn doors. Thomas had worked with her for 30 years. He'd watched Adrian grow up, mourned with her when her husband died, and kept the ranch running during the toughest storms. That was family, not the son who'd just tried to trap her. She pulled out her phone, the same phone Adrian claimed she barely knew how to use, and dialed a number she kept hidden under an unremarkable label. Roland answered on the 3rd ring. Miriam, please tell me this isn't what I think. His steady voice grounded her. It's exactly what you think, she replied solemnly. They brought a contract, Miriam explained. They want me to transfer everything in exchange for being locked in a facility. Silence filled the line as Roland absorbed her words. She pictured him adjusting his glasses in his cluttered office, pacing as he processed the betrayal. Did they mention a doctor? He finally asked. Dr. Caldwell, she answered. Roland cursed under his breath. That's extortion, Miriam. And if Caldwell is involved, this is a coordinated attempt to defraud you. Papers shuffled on his end. Photograph every page and send it to me. And tell me every detail for the next hour. Miriam photographed the contract with steady hands. Steadier than before because now she had purpose. Roland listened as she recounted every word, every threat, every manipulative gesture. When she finished, he exhaled sharply. This is worse than I expected, he murmured. But easier to dismantle than they think. They made several mistakes. Miriam felt a spark of hope. What mistakes? She asked. Roland cleared his throat. Abusive clauses. Illegal coercion. Threats involving a doctor. All of it is evidence. And they assume you're alone, unprotected. They don't know about the trust. They also didn't know she had kept a detailed digital journal for 2 years. Every suspicious comment, every odd visit, every question about finances. Dated, documented, indisputable. She hadn't written it because she was paranoid, contrary to Liora's accusation, but because something deep inside her whispered that a storm was coming. She had learned long ago to trust that instinct. So what now? She asked quietly. Roland didn't hesitate. Now we outplay them. They think they've won, but this is just the opening move. Tomorrow, I'll investigate Dr. Caldwell. You sign nothing. Not a single line. After hanging up, Miriam stared at the quiet house. The silence felt heavy, suffocating. She checked the clock past 6. Outside, she heard Thomas's truck leaving for the evening. Soon she would be alone with her thoughts, and she refused to let despair in. Instead, she dialed another familiar number. Evelyn Brooks answered with her usual warmth. "Miriam, I was just thinking about you. How was Adrian's visit?" The question cracked something inside Miriam. "Evelyn, can you come over? I need to talk." Evelyn's tone shifted instantly. "I'm on my way. 20 minutes. True to her word, Evelyn arrived in 19. She entered without knocking, as lifelong friends do, and froze when she saw Miriam's expression. "What did they do?" she asked, voice trembling with anger. Miriam told her everything. The threats, the manipulation, the contract, the plan to declare her incompetent. Evelyn's face flushed red with outrage. When Miriam finished, Evelyn slammed her hand on the table, making the contract jump. "That boy," she shouted. "After everything you gave him. And that snake he married. I knew she was trouble the first time I saw her." Evelyn paced across the kitchen, fuming. "They won't get away with this," she declared. "Not while I'm alive. Not while you have friends who care." Her fierce loyalty wrapped around Miriam like a warm blanket. For the first time that evening, Miriam felt the weight on her shoulders lighten. She wasn't alone. She had allies. She had strength. Adrian and Liora had made a fatal mistake. They underestimated the woman who raised him. They saw age and assumed weakness. They saw solitude and assumed vulnerability. They had no idea who Miriam Grant truly was. That night Miriam barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Adrian's hardened face and Liora's smug smirk. But when dawn broke, she rose with clarity she hadn't felt in months. Today, she would begin her counterattack. She dressed neatly, brewed strong coffee, and waited. At exactly 7 o'clock, Roland called. "Miriam, I have news," he said, sounding exhausted but triumphant. "I looked into Dr. Caldwell. He has nearly $200,000 in gambling debt across 3 casinos. He's vulnerable. Your son probably bribed him." Miriam closed her eyes, fury simmering beneath her ribs. Decades of trust, friendship, and medical care, all tossed aside by Caldwell for money. "There's more," Roland continued. "Adrian has been making inquiries at the county clerk's office for 6 months, researching title transfers, incapacitation procedures, legal timeframes. This didn't start yesterday, Miriam. Your son has been planning this for half a year." The revelation stole her breath. Half a year of deception, fake smiles, hollow concern. "What about Liora?" Miriam whispered. Roland paused. "Her past is interesting." "Miriam," Roland said slowly, "before marrying Adrian, Liora was briefly married to an older businessman. The union ended within a year after he accused her of manipulating his will. It never went to trial, they settled privately, but the pattern is clear. Your son isn't her first target. He's just her latest." Miriam felt her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Suddenly everything aligned. Liora's calculated questions, her gradual influence over Adrian, her subtle separation of mother and son. "Send me everything," Miriam demanded. "Documents, records, all of it. If they want war, then we fight clean but hard." After ending the call, Miriam dialed Thomas Hale. He arrived 20 minutes later, removing his hat respectfully as he stepped into her kitchen. "Miss Grant, you look troubled," he said gently. Miriam had known Thomas since he was a teenager working summers on her ranch. He was 55 now, loyal as ever. She explained everything, the contract, the threats, the coercion. Thomas's expression shifted from confusion to anger. "Young Adrian. I always thought he was easy to influence, but this..." He shook his head. "Mr. William would be ashamed. He worked his whole life for this land." Miriam felt her husband's name like a knife. "I won't let them destroy what he built," she whispered. Thomas nodded firmly. And you're not fighting alone. I'll testify to your strength, your work, your clarity of mind. Anyone who's seen you run this place knows you're sharper than most folks half your age." His loyalty steadied her heart. "Thank you, Thomas," she said. "This means more to me than I can explain." He placed a hand on the old wooden table. "You tell me what you need. I'm here, Ms. Grant. Always have been. Always will be." After Thomas left, Miriam stood at the kitchen window, watching the early sun lift over her golden fields. The wind danced across the land like a whisper, reminding her of her purpose. She wouldn't surrender the life she and her husband carved out of sweat and soil. Hours later, Roland arrived in person, holding a briefcase stuffed with documents. "I thought it best to come," he said, stepping inside. He spread papers across the dining table: Caldwell's debts, Liora's past lawsuit, Adrian's inquiries at the clerk's office. Miriam felt sick reading it all, but clarity sharpened her resolve. Roland tapped one document. "We'll compile everything into a protective case file. If they attempt legal action, we hit back immediately." Miriam exhaled slowly. "They said they'd return today before noon." Roland nodded. "Good. I'll be here when they come. Let them show their hand." For a moment, Miriam felt the weight of betrayal crushing her chest. "How could my son do this?" she whispered. Roland's expression softened. "Some hearts are easily manipulated, especially by people who know how to twist love into leverage." Miriam stared at the contract on the table. "Then today we end this at 11:48 a.m. The crunch of tires on gravel signaled their arrival. Adrian and Liora walked in without knocking, confidence dripping from their posture. Liora noticed Roland immediately and stiffened. "What's he doing here?" she snapped. Adrian forced a smile. "Mom, we said we'd come back." "Did you think it through?" Miriam met their eyes with quiet composure. "I did," she replied calmly. Liora smirked. "Then sign, and we can all move forward." Roland stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. "Before any signing happens, we need to discuss the legality of your proposal." Adrian's face paled. "What legality?" he muttered. Roland opened the folder and slid documents toward them: threats involving forced institutionalization, coercion using a medical professional, and attempts to obtain property under false pretenses. Liora laughed sharply. "That's ridiculous." Roland raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" "Because we have evidence, recordings, documented patterns, witnesses." Adrian swallowed hard, glancing nervously at Liora. "We were only concerned about Mom's safety," he insisted weakly. "Really?" Miriam asked softly. "Is that why you researched title transfers for 6 months? Or bribed a doctor drowning in gambling debt?" Liora's mask cracked. "Don't twist things," she snapped. "We're trying to help you." Miriam leaned back in her chair, her voice calm but icy. "Help? By stealing my home? By declaring me incompetent? By planning to lock me away while you lived off my land?" Adrian's jaw trembled, conflict flashing across his face. "Mom," Liora said. "Your wife said," Miriam corrected, "and you believed her over the woman who raised you." The room fell silent. Miriam let the truth hang there, heavy and undeniable. She watched her son shift uncomfortably, guilt flickering behind his eyes. Roland cleared his throat. "Here's what will happen. Miriam will not sign anything. If you attempt to force this issue, we will file a formal complaint for extortion, fraudulent coercion, and conspiracy." Liora stiffened. "You can't prove anything." Roland smirked. "We can prove enough." Adrian sank into a chair, shoulders collapsing. "I didn't think it would go this far," he whispered. Miriam studied him. "You had 6 months to think," she replied coldly. 6 months to tell the truth. 6 months to choose integrity. Instead you chose greed, or worse, you chose her." Liora stood abruptly. "We're leaving," she snapped. "This isn't over." Roland nodded. "Good. That means you understand the consequences." Adrian hesitated, looking at his mother one last time. His lips parted as if to apologize, but the words never came. Instead, he followed Liora out the door, shoulders slumped. The truck engine roared to life, and within seconds they disappeared again, dust rising behind them like a fading echo of their intentions. Miriam let out a breath she had been holding since morning, her body trembling with relief, rage, and heartbreak all at once. Roland placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. This was only the first confrontation. They may try again. Miriam nodded. I know. But at least now they understand I will not be cornered. Roland gathered the documents. I'll start drafting official protections. We'll reinforce your legal standing, restrict inquiries, and secure the trust further. Miriam felt strength return to her limbs. Thank you, Roland. Truly. He offered a rare, warm smile. You're tougher than they realized. She exhaled. They forgot who raised this ranch. They forgot who survived storms they couldn't imagine. After Roland left, Miriam stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air. The ranch stretched before her, the cattle grazing, the wind swaying the tall grass, the barn doors creaking gently. She ran a hand along the wooden porch rail, remembering the years she and her husband spent building this place. We protected it, William, she whispered into the wind. And I'll keep protecting it. The land answered with soft rustles. She felt grounded again, anchored by the soil beneath her boots. This was her home, not a prize for opportunistic children to grasp at. Later that day, Evelyn returned, carrying homemade soup and fury in equal measure. How did it go? She asked, eyes sharp with concern. Miriam told her everything. The confrontation, Roland's involvement, the exposed evidence. Evelyn clapped her hands together. Good. Let them choke on their own scheme. Miriam chuckled, the first genuine laugh she'd felt in days. I'm exhausted, she admitted. Evelyn sat beside her. You should be proud. You faced them with strength. They expected fear. They expected submission. Instead, they found a lioness. Miriam smiled faintly. I don't always feel like one. You don't have to feel like one to be one, Evelyn replied gently. They ate together, the comforting silence between them weaving friendship into the cracks left by betrayal. After dinner, Evelyn washed the dishes while Miriam sat at the table, reviewing the contract one last time. With a calm she didn't expect, she tore it into pieces. Slow, deliberate, final. Evelyn watched and nodded approvingly. Good riddance. Miriam stood and tossed the pieces into the fireplace. The flames devoured them quickly, turning threats into ash. A deep sense of release settled in her bones. As night fell, Miriam walked out to the fields where the sky glittered with stars. She remembered her husband's voice telling her long ago, "The land will always guide you." She closed her eyes and inhaled the scent of soil and grass. Despite everything, she felt a strange peace. She knew battles still waited. Legal filings, protection measures, potential retaliation. But she also knew she wasn't facing any of it alone. Roland had her back. Thomas would testify. Evelyn would burn the world before letting her fall. The next morning, Miriam woke before sunrise, clarity blooming like dawn. She brewed coffee, opened her notebook, and began listing every detail she remembered from the last 2 years. The journal she kept had already documented everything, but now she organized it strategically. Dates, comments, suspicious actions. She was building her own arsenal. By the time Roland called, she was ready. "Miriam," he said, "I've prepared the first set of legal protections. They'll be filed today." She smiled. "Thank you, Roland. Tell me what else we need." He chuckled. "That's the spirit." Around midday, Thomas returned with a folder of his own. "I gathered witness statements," he explained. "From workers, neighbors, people who've seen you manage things." Miriam blinked, overwhelmed. "Why did you do all this so fast?" Thomas shrugged. "Because you deserve better than what your son tried to pull." He paused. "Ms. Grant, you've always taken care of us. Now it's our turn." Tears pricked Miriam's eyes, but she pushed them back. Strength, not sadness, guided her now. Thank you, Thomas. Truly. Evelyn arrived minutes later, carrying a list of community members willing to vouch for Miriam's mental clarity and independence. If they want a fight, Evelyn declared, we'll give them the whole county. Miriam laughed softly. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Evelyn shrugged. It won't. Because they know now that you're not an easy target. Miriam exhaled deeply, gratitude swelling in her chest. She wasn't just defending a ranch, she was defending her life's legacy, her late husband's dream, and the dignity she built with her own 2 hands. That evening Miriam received a message from Adrian. We need space. We'll talk later. She stared at the words for a long moment. No apology. No remorse. No acknowledgement of the damage done. She deleted the message without replying. She had spent her whole life loving her son. Today, she finally learned to love herself enough to set boundaries. Adrian would face the consequences of his choices, whether he regretted them or not. And Miriam would no longer shrink herself to make room for his mistakes. As the sun set, Miriam stepped onto her porch, breathing the warm evening air. She felt her husband's presence in the golden sky, in the whisper of the wind, in the solid earth beneath her feet. I protected our home, she whispered. And I'll keep protecting it. Strength radiated through her. She wasn't just surviving, she was fighting, rebuilding, reclaiming. And she knew one thing with unwavering certainty. Adrian and Liora had launched a war they could never win. Because they underestimated the one woman they should have feared the most, Miriam Grant.